Welcome to a guide to every deck in EDH. Today we are looking at Chulane, Teller of Tales. So Chulane is a high value Bant commander that also has a bunch of combos. So what does Chulane do? 5 mana, 2/4 vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card and put a land, and then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So whenever you cast a creature, Growth Spiral, 3 mana tap, return target creature you control to its owner's hand. So obviously, casting creatures draws you a card for free and puts a land from your hand onto the battlefield for free. Rife with combos right from the get-go. So what are we doing? Card draw spells, Esper Sentinel, Mystic Remora, Ristic Study. Nissa is not exactly a card draw spell, but I mean this more in like card advantage terms. You're going to be putting multiple lands into play with Chulane and fetch lands, of course, which will trigger its ability to go find elves and elementals. So it kind of does the same thing. Obviously, Allurin is going to be a combo piece in this deck, as is Earthcraft, Cloudstone Curio. Again, anytime we're casting a creature, we're triggering Chulane, so we want things that can pick creatures back up. Overburden is a Stax / combo piece, 2 mana, blue enchantment. Whenever a player puts a creature card into play, so basically whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, that player returns a land they control to their owner's hand, which in your case doesn't matter because you get to put lands from your hand onto the battlefield for free with Chulane's trigger. And then we've got our self-bouncers, so Shrieking Drake, 1 mana flyer, ETB, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. White Mane Lion, 2 mana, 2/2 flash, ETB, return a creature you control to its owner's hand. There are other cards that basically do the same thing. So you could play any of those creatures in addition to these ones if you wanted more of those, more copies of these effects, but I think 2 is enough. So primarily what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping creatures either with Cloudstone Curio / Allurin, and triggering Chulane over and over and over to draw our entire deck and put all of the lands from our hand into play. That's going to be the main one. Earthcraft also allows us to use our creatures to untap basic lands to generate more mana, including basic lands that we put into play with Chulane. So we can do things like loop Shrieking Drake / White Mane Lion over and over with Cloudstone, or just Allurin. Like Shrieking Drake and White Mane can bounce themselves. So let's say you have Allurin plus Shrieking Drake, right? You cast Shrieking Drake for free, you, with the bounce trigger on the stack, tap it using Earthcraft, untap one of your lands, then Shrieking Drake's ability resolves, you bounce it back to your hand, the Earthcraft untapped one of your lands, you have an infinite mana. So those are going to be some of the combos we do. Then we've of course got a bunch of our counter spells, protect our combos, interact with our opponent. Fast mana, Jeweled Lotus. You could play other fast mana, but primarily just Jeweled Lotus. Bunch of lands, pretty stock Bant lands. Forbidden Orchard, doesn't matter, we're going to combo off before the tokens are relevant. Protective spells, we've got Destiny Spinner and Veil of Summer to make our stuff uncounterable. Silence, Grand Abolisher, and Ranger Captain of Eos all basically do essentially the same thing. Ranger Captain of Eos also, in this deck in particular, tutors up Shrieking Drake, which is one of our main combo pieces, so that is another use of Ranger Captain. Then we've got a bunch of ramp. We primarily want our ramp to be in the form of creatures, again, because they trigger Chulane and because they go enable our various combos with Cloudstone, Curio, Allurin, etc. So we've got just a bunch of Mana Dorks and Lotus Cobra and Nissa Resurgent Animist, because these trigger off of the various lands that we're putting into play with Chulane. Our removal spells, we do have a fair number of removal, of course the lands, but we also have Gilded Drake, Oko, Skyclave Apparition, Swords to Plowshares, and again, Skyclave and Gilded Drake being creatures is more relevant than it would be normally. Then we've got a bunch of Stax cards, so again, we're mostly playing creature-based ramp, so we don't need to have artifacts activated for the most part. So we've got Collector Oof, Null Rod, and Stony Silence to shut off artifacts. Overburden triggers our opponents, so we don't care about bouncing our own lands because we can put them back into play easily with Chulane, but our opponents do. Aven Mind Sensor to stop searching. Deafening Silence to stop Storm. Lavinia shuts off 0 mana cast spells, so things like Lotus Petal, Chrome Mox, etc. Also shuts off our opponent's ability to cast spells with a bunch of fast mana. So for example, if our opponents are going to cast Peer into the Abyss off of fast mana, they probably don't have 7 lands and therefore can't cast it. Drannith Magistrate, of course. Linvala to shut off creature activated abilities, and Mana Breach is a 3 mana enchantment that says whenever any player casts a spell, that player returns a land to their hand. So similar to Overburden, except instead of creatures entering the battlefield, it's casting a spell, which again, doesn't really matter too much for us because every creature spell that we cast allows us to put lands from our hand back into play with Chulane's trigger. Cyclonic Rift is our sweeper. Then we've got a bunch of tutors, mostly creature tutors. Chord, Eldamri's Call, Eldritch Evolution, Finale, Invasion of Ikoria, Neoform, Wargate, Worldly Tutor, but also we've got crop rotation. Pretty important when we've got Gaia's Cradle and a bunch of small creatures. Enlightened Tutor as well. This fetches up a bunch of our combo cards like Allurin, Earthcraft, etc. And then some other cards that I didn't really tag into any specific category. So Endurance, Ewit, Phantasmal Image, and Noxious Revival. Particularly Endurance has another relevant use in this deck, which is that if we draw too many cards and can't win for some reason, we can shuffle our graveyard back in, or put our graveyard back on the bottom rather, so that we don't deck out. But primarily it's going to be an anti-graveyard hate piece for our opponents. We also can loop Eternal Witness with our Cloudstone Curios or other cards that bounce things. And that is primarily Chulane. So we mostly want to get Chulane out, and then we either combo with one of our various combo pieces, or we use Stax cards, as seen here, to slow our opponents down and prevent them from doing stuff while accruing more advantage than our opponents are, because Chulane is triggering so many times and drawing us so many cards and putting so many lands onto the field. And that is Chulane, Teller of Tales.